Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, April 1881. While neighboring farmers rushed to plant spring wheat during optimal weather, Johann Reinhardt spent his sixth consecutive week hauling limestone slabs into a hole in the ground. His neighbors called it wasteful. They called him foolish. The 42-year-old German immigrant was building a root cellar floor 18 inches thick, 3 times deeper than standard frontier construction. The massive stone platform consumed his entire planting season, requiring 2,400 pounds of carefully selected limestone. Thomas Brennan shook his head, saying that was more stone than he'd used for his entire cabin foundation. Local builder William Hartford, who had constructed 30 cellars throughout Lancaster County, declared 4 to 6 inches of packed earth plenty for any family. Community leader Samuel Yoder, whose ice house served as the settlement's cooling standard, predicted that come summer, Reinhardt would wish he had wheat in the ground instead of stones in a hole. The root cellar itself followed conventional dimensions, 12 feet by 16 feet and 8 feet deep. But Reinhardt's floor construction defied every principle of practical frontier building. Standard cellars required 3 to 4 weeks of construction time and $8 to $12 in materials. Reinhardt was entering his 7th week with material costs approaching $47, a sum that could purchase a breeding cow or 6 months of provisions. His meticulous stone selection process consumed days at the local quarry, rejecting 3 stones for everyone he accepted. Dense limestone without fracture lines, uniform grain structure, specific weight characteristics that other builders dismissed as unnecessary precision. Thomas Brennan, whose family had farmed Irish land for generations before emigrating in 1873, found himself walking over to observe Reinhardt's progress with increasing bewilderment. Brennan's own root cellar, dug the previous autumn, featured a packed dirt floor that had served perfectly well through winter storage. His potatoes, turnips, and carrots had survived until spring planting without incident. The 4-inch packed earth provided adequate insulation at minimal cost and could be completed in an afternoon. "That man's laying a barn foundation underground," Brennan told his wife Margaret one evening, watching Reinhardt carefully fitting another course of stones. "Stone belongs in walls, not floors. Complete waste of good building material." The criticism carried weight in a community where every dollar and every hour meant the difference between prosperity and hardship during the growing season. William Hartford brought professional authority to the growing skepticism. Hartford's credentials were unquestionable. He had built over 30 root cellars, spring houses, and ice houses throughout southeastern Pennsylvania, each one following construction principles learned from his English stonemason father. His standard root cellar design called for packed earth floors, occasionally reinforced with 4 to 6 inches of flat stones for drainage. The design balanced cooling efficiency with construction economy, allowing farmers to complete storage facilities quickly and return to essential agricultural work. "I've built 30 cellars in these counties," Hartford declared to anyone within earshot. 4 inches of stone provides adequate thermal mass. Reinhardt is either a fool or doesn't understand Pennsylvania farming. That limestone should be going into foundation work where it earns its cost. The mathematical burden of Reinhardt's design became increasingly apparent as April progressed into May. Where Hartford's efficient cellars required approximately 600 pounds of stone and 4 days of labor, Reinhardt's massive floor demanded 2,400 pounds of carefully selected limestone and 6 full weeks of construction time. The additional 1,800 pounds of material represented labor that other farmers used to plant their primary cash crops during the narrow spring planting window. Samuel Yoder, whose Amish community had perfected icehouse construction for commercial-scale food preservation, watched Reinhardt's project with professional concern. Yoder's icehouse, built according to specifications proven over generations, maintained temperatures of 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit through the hottest summers by consuming winter-harvested ice. The system required substantial labor for ice cutting and storage, but provided reliable cooling that kept dairy products, meat, and produce fresh for extended periods. Yoder's expertise in thermal management made his skepticism particularly damaging to Reinhardt's credibility. Come July, Yoder predicted to assembled farmers at the settlement's weekly market, "He'll wish he had crops growing instead of that stone monument underground. My ice house keeps goods cold with proven methods. His floor will just sit there, cold in winter when you don't need it, warm in summer when you do." Yet Reinhardt persisted with quiet determination that puzzled his neighbors. When questioned about his methods, he offered only brief explanations that revealed knowledge sources unfamiliar to most American farmers. "Stone remembers the cold," he told Hartford during one exchange. "Deep earth stays cool all summer. Thick stone floor connects cellar to that cold. You put food on cold stone, food stays cold." The explanation seemed reasonable in theory, but the practical reality of sacrificing an entire planting season for unproven cooling benefits struck most settlers as impractical experimentation they could not afford. By late May, Reinhardt had completed his peculiar cellar while neighbors finished their spring planting. The community consensus held firm. He had wasted prime agricultural time on excessive construction that offered no clear advantages over conventional methods. The true test would come not in spring's moderate temperatures, but in summer heat that would stress every cooling system to its designed limits. June 1881 brought the first real test of competing cooling systems throughout Lancaster County. Temperatures climbed to 88 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-month, warm enough to challenge food preservation methods, but not extreme enough to cause widespread failures. The performance differences between storage facilities became measurable, creating the first concrete data that would either vindicate Reinhardt's methods or confirm his neighbor's skepticism. Thomas Brennan's dirt floor cellar registered 62 degrees Fahrenheit when he descended the steps on June 18th with his mercury thermometer. The temperature proved adequate for root vegetable storage, and his potatoes showed no signs of sprouting or softening. His wife Margaret's butter, stored in ceramic crocks, maintained reasonable firmness through morning hours, though it softened noticeably by afternoon. William Hartford's cellar, featuring his standard 4-inch stone floor, performed better at 58 degrees, providing sufficient cooling for his family's dairy products and preserved meats. Samuel Yoder's ice house maintained an impressive 45 degrees, though he noted in his meticulous records that ice consumption ran 15% higher than typical June usage. Reinhardt's cellar registered 52 degrees Fahrenheit, a full 6 degrees cooler than Hartford's professional construction, and 10 degrees below Brennan's conventional design. The temperature difference translated into observable preservation advantages. Margaret Brennan noticed during her weekly visits to Reinhardt's wife Anna that butter retrieved from the Reinhardt cellar remained firm enough for immediate table use, while her own required sitting near the window for spreading consistency. Milk stored in Reinhardt's cellar lasted 4 days before souring, compared to the standard 2 to 3 day maximum in conventional storage. Hartford acknowledged the superior cooling during a Sunday gathering at the settlement's shared meeting ground. "It's cooler, I'll grant him that," Hartford told assembled farmers. "But my cellar works fine for what my family needs. Not worth sacrificing an entire planting season for a few degrees difference." The sentiment captured prevailing community opinion. Reinhardt's cellar performed better, but the improvement seemed marginal compared to the extraordinary investment in time and materials. The technical explanation Reinhardt offered to curious neighbors revealed knowledge sources that most American farmers had never encountered. His cellar design incorporated a ventilation shaft system, a 4-inch diameter pipe extending 12 feet underground to the north side of his property, fitted with a simple wooden baffle that prevented direct air blasts while encouraging circulation. The shaft connected the cellar to earth temperatures at depth, where ground maintained consistent 52 to 55 degree readings, regardless of surface air conditions. The 18-inch limestone floor provided thermal mass that absorbed heat slowly, requiring weeks of sustained warmth to significantly raise its temperature. Ground at 8 feet down stays cold all summer, Reinhardt explained to a small group that included Hartford and Brennan. Air temperature changes every day, but earth temperature barely moves. My stone floor touches that cold earth, holds that cold like a bank holds money. Heavy stone takes long time to warm up, long time to cool down. That's why 18 inches, not 4 inches. The physics made theoretical sense, but June's moderate temperatures failed to demonstrate whether the principle would hold under genuine stress. Samuel Yoder questioned the sustainability of Reinhardt's approach during the same gathering. "What happens when we get real heat?" Yoder asked, his tone carrying professional skepticism earned through decades of commercial food preservation experience. "My ice house handles the hottest summers because ice stays frozen until I need its cold. Your stone floor has no ice, no external cooling source. When July brings 95-degree days, that stone will warm up just like everything else." The observation seemed logical to most listeners. Reinhardt's cellar benefited from spring's residual ground coolness, but sustained summer heat would eventually penetrate 8 feet of earth and warm his expensive limestone floor to useless temperatures. Two younger farmers asked Reinhardt about stone selection criteria, showing interest in understanding his methods, even if they doubted their superiority. He explained the importance of limestone density, how proper stone should weigh 150 to 165 pounds per cubic foot, how grain structure affected moisture management and thermal properties. Reinhardt also described knowledge sources that seemed almost exotic to Pennsylvania farmers. Bavarian earth cellars from his childhood, where families stored food in deep underground chambers lined with thick stone. Swiss alpine root cellars he had observed during his youth, built into hillsides with massive thermal mass, providing year-round cooling. He mentioned a previous cellar he had constructed in Ohio in 1876, a smaller version that had performed well, but taught him the importance of adequate thickness and proper ventilation design. By late June, the community maintained its position. Reinhardt's cellar worked slightly better than conventional designs, but the difference hardly justified the massive investment. Brennan's family preserved their dairy products adequately. Hartford's professional construction served his needs without excessive cost. Yoder's ice house provided superior cooling through proven methods, despite its operational expenses. The consensus held that Reinhardt had overbuilt for marginal benefits, a common mistake among immigrants who failed to adapt European methods to American practical realities. June's moderate temperatures provided adequate testing, but failed to stress conventional cellars beyond their designed capacity. The doubters maintained their skepticism, waiting for genuine summer heat that would prove whether Reinhardt's expensive stone floor offered real advantages or merely represented wasteful construction that couldn't withstand conditions that truly mattered. Then, July brought temperatures that would test every cooling method to its breaking point. Early July 1881 brought sustained heat that tested every cooling system in Lancaster County beyond June's moderate challenges. Temperatures climbed to 95 degrees Fahrenheit and stayed there for 10 consecutive days, creating preservation conditions that revealed the true differences between adequate design and superior engineering. The performance gap between Reinhardt's thermal mass cellar and conventional storage widened from interesting to critical as the mercury refused to drop below 90 degrees even during nighttime hours. Thomas Brennan descended into his dirt floor cellar on July 7th to find his thermometer reading 68 degrees, a full 16 degrees warmer than his June measurements. The temperature crossed the threshold where dairy spoilage accelerated rapidly. He lost 8 gallons of milk in 2 days, watching helplessly as the liquid soured hours after collection, despite immediate cellar storage. His wife Margaret's carefully churned butter transformed from firm blocks into soft, oily masses unusable for table service or market sale. The family's cheese-making operation, which required temperatures below 60 degrees for proper aging, failed completely when curds refused to set in the oppressive heat. William Hartford's professional construction performed better, but still struggled against the sustained warmth. His cellar registered 64 degrees on July 8th, adequate for root vegetables but marginal for dairy products. His butter remained salvageable if used immediately after retrieval, but any delay resulted in complete liquefaction. Fresh meat spoiled within 6 hours of storage, forcing the family to consume or salt all butchered products immediately, reducing their economic value substantially. Hartford found himself descending into his cellar every 2 hours to monitor conditions, moving products between cooler and warmer zones in a desperate attempt to extend preservation times. Samuel Yoder's ice house maintained 52 degrees through sheer consumption of his winter ice reserves. His meticulous records showed ice melting at 3 times the normal July rate, with daily losses exceeding his careful calculations for sustainable summer operations. By July 10th, he faced the sobering reality that his ice supply would exhaust completely by mid-month if the heat continued, leaving him without cooling for the remainder of summer. The operational costs of his system, usually manageable through the season, spiraled toward unsustainable levels that threatened to consume his entire cooling budget in 3 weeks. Reinhardt's cellar registered 53 degrees on July 9th, just 1 degree warmer than his June readings. The massive limestone floor absorbed heat so slowly that 10 days of sustained 95-degree temperatures barely affected interior conditions. His family's dairy products maintained market quality without special handling. Margaret Brennan watched through her kitchen window as Anna Reinhardt retrieved firm butter from the cellar at noon, the block holding its shape in the oppressive heat, while Margaret's own butter sat as liquid in its crock. The contrast became a daily reminder of the performance difference between adequate and excellent. The economic impact of the heat wave became measurable by July 10th. Brennan calculated losses of $6 in spoiled dairy products, with costs rising daily as the heat persisted. Hartford estimated $450 in ruined goods, plus uncounted hours of extra labor managing his struggling cellar. Yoder faced $8 in premature ice consumption, with the catastrophic prospect of complete system failure if temperatures remained elevated. Reinhardt reported 0 spoilage, his family continuing normal preservation routines while neighbors scrambled to salvage what they could. The technical explanation for Reinhardt's success became clearer as the heat wave continued. Earth temperature at 8 feet depth remained locked at 53 degrees regardless of surface conditions, a thermal reservoir that conventional shallow construction could never access. The 2,400 pounds of limestone acted as a massive battery, requiring sustained heat transfer over weeks to significantly warm its core temperature. The 18-inch thickness meant that heat penetrating the top surface had enormous mass to warm before affecting the bottom layers in contact with the cool earth below. Reinhardt's ventilation system proved equally critical during the sustained heat. He opened his shaft at dawn when outside air dropped to its coolest, allowing fresh circulation through the cellar. By 9 in the morning, he sealed the system completely, preventing hot daytime air from entering and warming his thermal mass. Evening assessments determined whether additional ventilation would benefit overnight cooling or whether the cellar had maintained sufficient temperature stability to remain sealed until the next dawn cycle. Hartford began measuring Reinhardt's cellar with his own thermometer, initially suspecting the German immigrant of exaggerating his results. The readings confirmed what seemed impossible. While Hartford's professional construction struggled at 64 degrees and Brennan's conventional cellar failed at 68 degrees, Reinhardt's cellar held steady at 53 degrees, performing better under extreme stress than Hartford's ice house typically managed under normal conditions. The mathematical reality could not be dismissed. Reinhardt's expensive, time-consuming construction delivered cooling that conventional methods could not match. Margaret Brennan noted that her family had lost more in spoiled goods during 10 days of July heat than Reinhardt's entire construction premium over standard cellar costs. The $35 difference between conventional and thermal mass construction seemed wasteful in April, but appeared economically rational by mid-July. Yoder calculated that his icehouse operational costs of $12 for ice plus $18 in harvest labor annually exceeded Reinhardt's one-time construction investment, with the sobering recognition that his system faced complete failure, while Reinhardt's continued performing flawlessly. The community discussions shifted from skepticism to grudging acknowledgement that Reinhardt's methods delivered measurable advantages under stress conditions. But the doubters maintained one final position. July's heat, while uncomfortable, represented unusual but manageable conditions. Farmers consoled themselves that their cellars struggled but survived, their losses painful but not catastrophic. Then, July 12th, brought temperatures that would break every cooling system built on conventional principles and prove beyond doubt which methods could handle nature's harshest tests. July 12th, 1881. The mercury hit 101 degrees Fahrenheit by noon and stayed there for 8 consecutive days, the longest extreme heat wave in regional memory. Temperatures that had stressed conventional cooling systems during early July now shattered them completely, creating a survival crisis that separated theoretical adequacy from practical life-sustaining performance. Thomas Brennan's dirt floor cellar reached 78 degrees by July 14th, transforming from marginal food storage into a complete failure that cost his family dearly. Every gallon of milk soured within hours of storage. His wife Margaret watched helplessly as their entire week's dairy production, 30 gallons representing $7.50 in potential income, became unusable liquid that had to be fed to pigs or discarded. Butter liquefied completely, impossible to salvage even for cooking purposes. Fresh vegetables wilted within a day of cellar storage, their cellular structure collapsing in the oppressive heat. Brennan burned through his entire monthly firewood allocation in 4 days, desperately stoking his springhouse fire to boil and preserve what little he could salvage, a futile effort that consumed resources without delivering meaningful results. William Hartford's professional construction collapsed under conditions that exceeded every design specification he had learned from his stonemason father. His cellar registered 72 degrees on July 15th, temperatures that made dairy storage impossible and meat preservation a matter of immediate consumption or total loss. He butchered a pig on July 13th, intending to salt and preserve the meat for winter consumption, but the cellar's heat caused spoilage within 6 hours despite his best preservation efforts. The family consumed what they could immediately and watched $8 worth of protein spoil before their eyes. Hartford's cheese aging operation, a supplemental income source that typically generated $15 to $20 annually, halted completely as temperatures made bacterial management impossible. Samuel Yoder faced catastrophic failure of his supposedly superior icehouse system. By July 16th, 4 days into the extreme heat, his winter ice reserves exhausted completely. The ice that should have sustained his operation through September melted in a frantic battle against temperatures his storage design could never withstand. His cellar temperature climbed from 52 degrees to 58 degrees within 24 hours of ice depletion, then continued rising toward ambient conditions. The economic devastation exceeded simple spoilage costs. Yoder had invested $12 in winter ice cutting and $18 in storage labor, expecting reliable summer cooling. Instead, his system failed at precisely the moment when cooling mattered most, leaving him worse off than neighbors with simple dirt cellars, who at least avoided the false security of supposed reliability. The community-wide crisis extended beyond individual family losses into genuine survival concerns. 3 families lost breeding livestock to heat stress, unable to provide sufficiently cool water during the hottest afternoon hours. Children throughout the settlement suffered heat-related illness, their small bodies unable to regulate temperature, in homes that became ovens Despite every ventilation effort, agricultural productivity dropped dramatically as field workers could not labor safely during midday heat, forcing families to work dawn and dusk hours exclusively. Evening gatherings that typically featured social conversation instead became desperate strategy sessions, discussing survival tactics and resource conservation. The Reinhardt cellar stood as a remarkable contrast to the community's suffering. Johann's thermometer registered 54 degrees on July 16th, just 1 degree warmer than early July readings and well within safe food preservation ranges. The massive limestone floor absorbed heat so gradually that even 8 consecutive days of 101-degree temperatures barely affected its core temperature. The family continued normal preservation routines while neighbors abandoned all attempts at food storage. Anna Reinhardt churned butter on July 17th, producing firm blocks that maintained their shape through the afternoon heat. Her cheese aging continued without interruption, the cultures developing properly in the stable 54-degree environment. Fresh milk lasted 3 full days in storage, allowing the family to maintain their dairy production schedule and market sales, while every neighbor's operation collapsed. Margaret Brennan stood at her kitchen window on July 18th, watching Anna Reinhardt descend into her cellar and emerge moments later with a crock of firm butter. Margaret's own butter sat as liquid oil in a jar, unusable for any purpose. The visual contrast between the family's situations had moved beyond mere performance differences to become a stark illustration of preparation versus desperation. While the Brennan family scrambled to salvage anything from their failing storage, the Reinhardt family proceeded with normal summer routines, their children playing comfortably while other families' children lay listless in whatever shade could be found. William Hartford approached Reinhardt on July 19th, carrying his thermometer as a proof of what he could barely believe. He had measured Reinhardt's cellar himself, unwilling to trust second-hand reports of performance that defied his professional understanding. The reading confirmed 54 degrees, a temperature Hartford's own cellar had not achieved since early June. His professional reputation, built on 30 cellars constructed according to proven English methods, crumbled in the face of measurable evidence that his expertise had failed under the conditions that truly mattered. Samuel Yoder performed his own calculations during those desperate days, comparing his icehouse economics to Reinhardt's one-time construction investment. Yoder had spent $30 annually on icehouse operations, expecting reliable performance that justified the substantial cost. 3 years of operation meant $90 invested in a system that had catastrophically failed, leaving him with nothing but spoiled goods and the bitter recognition that Reinhardt's $47 construction cost would have paid for itself many times over. The supposed wastefulness of April's extended construction now appeared as the only rational decision any farmer should have made. The economic devastation by July 19th painted a precise picture of conventional failure. The average Lancaster County family lost $22 in spoiled goods during the 8-day heat wave, equivalent to 3 weeks of farm labor income. Brennan's losses exceeded $25 when accounting for destroyed dairy products, spoiled meat, and ruined vegetables. Hartford calculated $18 in direct spoilage, plus uncounted hours of desperate labor attempting to salvage anything from his failing cellar. Yoder's icehouse failure cost him $35 in premature ice loss, plus $15 in spoiled commercial goods he had contracted to preserve for other families. Reinhardt reported zero spoilage. His construction premium of $35 over conventional cellar costs had been recovered in a single week of extreme weather, with decades of reliable performance still ahead. As temperatures finally broke on July 20th and evening coolness returned to Lancaster County, Hartford made a request that would have been unthinkable 8 days earlier. He asked Reinhardt to teach him how to build a thermal mass cellar, acknowledging that his professional expertise had proven inadequate against nature's harshest test. William Hartford's formal request on July 20th marked the beginning of a knowledge transfer that would transform Lancaster County's approach to food preservation. 23 farmers gathered in Reinhardt's yard on July 24th, their recent losses creating urgent motivation to learn methods that could prevent future catastrophes. Johann Reinhardt, who had endured months of mockery for his wasteful construction, now found himself teaching techniques that represented survival rather than mere improvement. The stone selection workshop began at Miller's Quarry on July 26th, where Reinhardt demonstrated identification criteria that most builders had never considered relevant. Proper limestone required density between 150 and 165 pounds per cubic foot, substantially heavier than the porous stone that conventional construction accepted without question. He showed farmers how to test grain structure by striking samples with a hammer, listening for the solid ring that indicated tight crystalline formation versus the dull thud of inferior material. Surface texture mattered equally, with smooth-grained stone providing better thermal mass properties than rough fractured surfaces that trapped air pockets and reduced heat transfer efficiency. The rejection rate shocked attending farmers. Reinhardt dismissed 40% of quarried stone as unsuitable, explaining that thermal mass construction demanded material quality that standard building could ignore. Thomas Brennan, watching Reinhardt reject stone after stone, understood for the first time why the German immigrant had spent 6 weeks on construction that conventional wisdom completed in days. Proper material selection required knowledge that American frontier building practices had never developed. Techniques preserved in European traditions that valued long-term performance over immediate convenience. Construction technique demonstrations revealed equally critical details that separated adequate cellars from superior systems. Foundation preparation required excavation to exactly 8 feet depth, the point where earth temperature remained stable at 52 to 55 degrees regardless of surface conditions. Shallower construction failed to access this thermal reservoir, leaving cellars vulnerable to seasonal temperature swings that destroyed their cooling capacity. Reinhardt explained that his previous Ohio cellar in 1876 had been dug to only 6 feet depth, a compromise that reduced construction time but delivered marginal performance that taught him the importance of reaching true ground temperature stability. Mortar composition proved equally critical to system success. Reinhardt used lime-based mortar rather than the clay mixtures that conventional construction employed, explaining that lime provided moisture resistance essential for underground applications. Clay mortars absorbed water, weakening joints and creating pathways for heat infiltration that compromised thermal performance. The lime mixture cost 30% more than clay alternatives, another seemingly wasteful expense that delivered measurable benefits under actual operating conditions. The laying pattern for the 18-inch thick floor required precision that exceeded standard masonry work. Reinhardt demonstrated tight joint techniques that minimized gaps between stones, preventing air pockets that would create thermal bridges allowing heat transfer. Each stone required individual fitting and adjustment, time-consuming work that explained why proper construction demanded 6 to 8 weeks, rather than the 4 days Hartford's conventional methods required. The thickness itself was non-negotiable. Reinhardt had experimented with 12-inch depths in Ohio and found them inadequate for sustained heat resistance. The additional 6 inches represented the difference between marginal performance and reliable cooling under extreme conditions. Ventilation system design incorporated principles that most American farmers had never encountered. Reinhardt's shaft placement on the north side of his property ensured coolest possible air intake, while the 12-foot depth connected directly to stable ground temperatures. The baffle system prevented direct air blasts that would disturb stored goods, while encouraging gentle circulation that maintained air quality without introducing external heat. Operation schedules proved equally important. Opening the shaft at dawn, when air temperatures dropped to their coolest, allowed beneficial circulation, but the system required complete sealing by 9 in the morning, to prevent hot daytime air from warming the thermal mass. Samuel Yoder asked detailed questions about seasonal adjustments, recognizing that winter operations would require different management than summer cooling. Reinhardt explained that the same thermal mass that resisted summer warming also resisted winter cooling, maintaining 48 to 52-degree temperatures year-round. This dual benefit prevented the freezing problems that plagued conventional cellars during January cold snaps, protecting stored goods from frost damage that cracked containers and ruined root vegetables. Safety and maintenance protocols addressed concerns about moisture management and structural longevity. Drainage systems required careful installation to prevent water accumulation that could undermine foundations or create excessive humidity. Annual inspections checked mortar joints for deterioration and stone surfaces for cracking, though properly constructed systems required minimal maintenance over their 50-year operational lifespans. Temperature logging allowed optimization of ventilation schedules based on specific site conditions and seasonal patterns. The transformation of the three primary skeptics demonstrated how crisis experience converted theoretical doubt into practical adoption. Thomas Brennan began gathering suitable limestone in early August, calculating that his heatwave losses of 25 VA exceeded Reinhardt's construction premium and would be recovered in a single severe weather event. His wife Margaret documented their annual spoilage costs at $18.75. Mathematical evidence that thermal mass construction delivered economic returns within 2 summer seasons. William Hartford applied his professional building expertise to standardize Reinhardt's design, creating written specifications that other farmers could follow without requiring individual consultation. His transformation from skeptic to advocate provided credibility that accelerated community adoption, as settlers trusted Hartford's professional judgment more readily than they accepted immigrant innovations. Hartford began offering consulting services for thermal mass cellar construction. His reputation rebuilt on willingness to abandon inadequate methods when superior alternatives proved themselves under the harshest possible testing. Samuel Yoder's meticulous records provided the most compelling economic analysis of competing systems. His ice house had cost $30 annually in operations over 3 years, a $90 investment that had catastrophically failed during the July crisis. Reinhardt's construction premium of $35 over conventional cellars represented a one-time expense that would deliver 120 hours of annual labor savings by eliminating ice harvesting requirements. The payback period of 1.6 years made thermal mass construction the most economically rational decision any farmer could make, transforming Yoder from defender of icehouse technology into advocate for passive, earth-coupled cooling. By late August 1881, 4 farmers had begun immediate thermal mass cellar construction, determined to complete systems before the following summer. 6 others planned autumn projects, intending to use post-harvest labor availability for the extended construction timelines that proper building required. The local quarry reported a 250% increase in limestone orders, requiring expanded operations to serve demand that had exploded from Reinhardt's solitary project into community-wide adoption of methods that July's crisis had proven essential for reliable food preservation. By September 1881, the transformation of Lancaster County's food preservation philosophy had begun with measurable urgency. 8 thermal mass cellars reached completion before winter, their builders racing to finish construction before ground froze and made excavation impossible. William Hartford standardized the design specifications, publishing detailed plans he titled The Reinhardt System that provided precise measurements, material requirements, and construction timelines. The Pennsylvania-German newspaper Der Lancaster Bote published a technical article in October describing earth-coupled thermal mass principles, spreading knowledge beyond the immediate farming community to German settlements throughout southeastern Pennsylvania. Winter performance revealed benefits that summer testing had not demonstrated. The same thermal mass that resisted summer warming also prevented winter freezing, maintaining stable temperatures between 48 and 52 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of surface conditions. Thomas Brennan's conventional cellar dropped to 38 degrees during January 1882, cold snaps, freezing his stored potatoes and cracking ceramic storage containers. Reinhardt's cellar held steady at 50 degrees, protecting root vegetables from frost damage that plagued shallow storage systems. The dual benefit of year-round temperature stability transformed thermal mass construction from summer cooling solution into comprehensive food preservation system that performed reliably through all seasonal extremes. The Lancaster County Agricultural Society conducted formal performance studies during 1882 and 1883, documenting economic outcomes with precision that provided compelling adoption arguments. Thermal mass cellars averaged 450 in annual spoilage losses, primarily from normal handling damage rather than temperature-related preservation failures. Conventional dirt floor cellars lost 1875 annually to spoilage caused by inadequate cooling during summer months and excessive cold during winter freezes. Ice houses, previously considered the premium preservation option, cost $8.25 in spoilage plus $30 in operational expenses for ice harvesting and storage, totaling $38.25 annually for performance that could catastrophically fail during extreme weather. Construction costs stabilized at $45 to $55, depending on site-specific conditions such as soil composition, water table depth, and stone availability. The payback period ranged from 1.5 to 2.5 years, after which thermal mass systems delivered pure economic advantage for their entire operational lifetime. That lifetime proved remarkably long. Properly constructed thermal mass cellars functioned reliably for 50 years or more, compared to the 15 to 20-year lifespan of conventional cellars that required periodic reconstruction as earth floors compacted and drainage systems failed. Regional adoption spread rapidly through agricultural networks and family connections. By 1882, 34 thermal mass cellars operated in Lancaster County, their performance during that summer's moderate heat validating the technology under normal rather than crisis conditions. The technique spread to neighboring Berks, Lebanon, and York counties in 1883 as farmers shared experiences through seasonal market gatherings and church community exchanges. The Pennsylvania Agricultural Extension Service recommended the design in 1884 after reviewing performance data and construction specifications, providing official endorsement that accelerated adoption among conservative farmers who waited for institutional approval before implementing innovations. By 1885, over 200 documented thermal mass cellar installations existed across southeastern Pennsylvania, representing a fundamental shift in regional food preservation practices. William Hartford developed size variations accommodating different family needs, from compact 8 by 10 foot designs for small households to expansive 16 by 20 foot commercial operations serving dairy businesses. Hybrid retrofit designs allowed existing cellars to incorporate partial thermal mass improvements without complete reconstruction, making the technology accessible to farmers who could not afford entirely new facilities. Regional adaptations emerged as the technology spread beyond limestone-rich Lancaster County. Berks County builders used local sandstone, adjusting thickness to 20 inches to compensate for sandstone's lower thermal mass compared to limestone's superior heat storage capacity. Mountain region farmers in northern Pennsylvania employed granite, the densest available stone, allowing 16-inch floor thickness while achieving equivalent thermal performance. These variations demonstrated that the underlying principles of earth coupling and thermal mass transcended specific material requirements, allowing adaptation to diverse geological conditions throughout the state. Recognition came from agricultural authorities and government agencies documenting frontier development patterns. Johann Reinhardt received an Agricultural Innovation Award at the 1883 Pennsylvania State Fair, official acknowledgement that his supposedly wasteful construction represented genuine advancement in food preservation technology. The United States Department of Agriculture published Bulletin Number 47 in 1884, featuring earth-coupled thermal mass storage as a recommended practice for farm operations nationwide. German-American agricultural journals distributed throughout the Midwest carried detailed construction articles, spreading the technique to immigrant communities in Ohio, Indiana, and Wisconsin, where European building traditions made farmers receptive to thermal mass principles. Amish communities, initially skeptical of departures from traditional icehouse methods, adopted thermal mass cellars extensively after economic analyses confirmed their superiority. Samuel Yoder became an advocate within Amish farming networks, his meticulous cost documentation providing persuasive evidence that resonated with communities valuing practical efficiency and resource conservation. The elimination of ice harvesting labor proved particularly attractive to Amish families who could redirect 120 annual hours toward more productive agricultural activities. Personal outcomes for the principal figures illustrated how crisis-driven innovation rewarded both originator and early adopters. Johann Reinhardt became a consulting expert, traveling throughout Pennsylvania to demonstrate construction techniques and site evaluation methods. His modest prosperity came not from wealth accumulation, but from respect earned through practical wisdom that transformed community welfare. Thomas Brennan, among the earliest adopters after his July crisis losses, shared economic testimony at agricultural gatherings, his conversion from skeptic to advocate carrying weight among conservative farmers who trusted peer experience over theoretical arguments. William Hartford built a successful consulting business, publishing Practical Root Cellar Construction in 1884, a comprehensive manual that combined Reinhardt's thermal mass principles with Hartford's professional masonry expertise. His professional redemption came through acknowledging that traditional methods had limitations and superior alternatives deserved adoption regardless of their unconventional sources. Samuel Yoder documented savings meticulously, his records showing $180 in operational cost avoidance over 5 years compared to continued icehouse operation. Mathematical proof that initial construction investment delivered sustained economic returns. By 1885, the measurable legacy of thermal mass adoption included $8,000 to $12,000 in preserved goods value across documented installations, representing food security that conventional methods could not guarantee. An estimated 15,000 labor hours were saved through elimination of ice harvesting and reduced spoilage replacement work, time redirected toward productive agricultural activities that improved overall farm efficiency. 200 families gained reliable food preservation that enhanced both economic stability and nutritional security, particularly benefiting children whose health depended on consistent access to fresh dairy products and preserved vegetables. The historical significance extended beyond individual economic benefits to demonstrate successful integration of European traditional knowledge with American frontier conditions. Reinhardt's willingness to invest in proven principles, despite community mockery, combined with his neighbors' wisdom in abandoning inadequate methods when superior alternatives proved themselves, created a model for technological adoption that valued performance over convention. The transformation preserved earth-coupling knowledge that industrial refrigeration would later make obsolete, capturing traditional techniques before they disappeared from practical use. By 1890, visitors to Lancaster County noticed unusually deep cellars with thick stone floors throughout German farming communities, silent testimony to one immigrant's practical wisdom and a community's ability to recognize superior methods when crisis conditions revealed the inadequacy of conventional practices. Johann Reinhardt's original cellar still maintained its steady 52 to 54-degree temperature through summers and winters, a limestone monument to understanding natural thermal processes that delivered reliable performance long after simpler construction had failed and been forgotten.